Thank you for joining us with Aging with Grace on Think Tech Hawaii. Today we have lovely Stephen. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Well, I'm Stephen Albert Kula.
Okay.
Well, that's rare. I very rarely say my middle name, but and I'm the president of Legacy of Life Hawaii here in Hawaii. And thank you for having me on the show.
Wonderful. We're so excited to talk to you today. So already I've learned so much, and the list goes on of what we're learning. So first, though, we'd just like to find out a little bit about your background and what. I know it's a long background. First, tell us what you do now. How about that?
Right now, I am, like I said, I am the president and CEO of Legacy of Life Hawaii, and we are the only federally registered organization to recover organs in the state of Hawaii. And I can get into that a little bit later, but it's very regulated. We are a nonprofit. We're required to be a nonprofit organization. And that's part of the regulations from the feds that they want to avoid any misunderstanding about the distribution of organs that are recovered for transplantation. And basically, we work with the transplant centers, and there can be more than one transplant center in the state of Hawaii, but our population is small enough, and the number of people that need transplants is low enough that only one transplant center is currently working in the state of Hawaii.
Okay.
My background, if you want to know that one, I am a local boy. I'm a 67 Maryknoll grad.
Nice.
Okay. I also am a UH Leeward Community College graduate. I am now a Chaminade graduate. I am a Colorado State graduate, a Kennedy Western University graduate, and I've attended several other colleges as well.
That's a lot of letters behind that name.
Yeah, I have 5 degrees.
Wow.
But
what are they in?
well, that's a good one. Computer science,
Okay.
veterinary medicine. I have a master's in avian medicine, which was one of my positions when I was on the mainland. I have a PhD in business administration, agriculture. I also have a pre-vet med degree. I also have a master's degree in production management, and I have a master's degree in pastoral theology.
Wow.
So
That's
many careers.
Wow,
Well, my
that's
father-in-law
incredible.
says I'm a perpetual student. So,
Yes.
and I agree with him. I love learning.
That's great.
But my first jobs here locally were with Kaiser and with the gas company.
Kaiser is in high school, or?
No, Kaiser
Henry.
Henry. I was Henry J. Kaiser's house boy butler for the last 4 or 5 years of his life.
Wow. How
Locally.
old were you then?
13.
13.
Until I graduated from high school. He died in '67, and I was an honor guard at his funeral. So he was he probably was one of my most important mentors when I was growing up at that young age. I learned a lot of business sense from him. He was a fantastic businessman, and so I learned a lot about what he wanted for Hawaii. Most people don't realize that Hawaii Kai, he developed that as a gift to the Hawaiian people. So you could buy a home back in the 60s for very little in Hawaii Kai. But once he died, all the prices went sky high. He was the one that kept the prices low so that the people of Hawaii could afford to buy homes back then.
Wow.
So that was one of his gifts to Hawaii. Also, Kaiser Permanente was for his workers so that they would have good health care. But he was also Kaiser Steel, Kaiser Aluminum, Kaiser Jeep. So,
Wow.
yeah, he was a very
Astute businessman, and you
definitely
were raised
in that environment.
Wow.
Yes. So I had a great time. From there, I went to, graduating from high school in '67.
From where? Oh, in Maryknoll, you
Maryknoll,
said.
yeah. And one of the few things I won in a raffle in my life was the draft.
Congratulations,
yeah,
attaboy.
I didn't get drafted, but I did enlist because my draft number was so small. And I spent 13 months in Vietnam in 1968-69 as a Marine. So
Wow.
I got a lot of education from the Marine Corps, which really helped me also because it gave me the discipline that I need. And it gave me a good learning environment of what third world countries are like and what poverty can really be like and living in poverty. And I think that's part of why I do what I do now, besides the sisters that raised me also, because I went to Catholic school, was raised by the Sisters of St. Joseph Carondelet and by the Maryknoll sisters. And that's why I have long earlobes.
Come here, you.
Come here, boy. I have no feeling in my earlobes either. I think I went up and down the stairs at Maryknoll several times by the earlobe. But they always loved you. You know, they never hurt me or anything, but they loved me. And they instilled in us the idea of service. And service is how you pay back your community for living in your community and for doing what the community does for you. So what you give
that's incredible.
comes back to you multiple times. And that's the way I feel about what I do and why I do it. From there, I went to college and graduate school, and I was actually in production management for many years. Well, I shouldn't say many years, about 6 to 8 years. I was also given a congressional fellowship when I was in graduate school, so I served in Capitol Hill with the Senate Finance Committee and did some of my graduate research at the Library of Congress.
Incredible. Wow.
So when I got into production, actual egg production, I was in charge of about 1.1 million laying birds a day. So I was their health and welfare manager. So I controlled their diets and their management and so forth.
Oh, so that was what
I did
with
for the veterinary
production.
medicine end of it was with birds.
Okay.
I also do volunteer work with the Humane Society and so forth. I take care of some of their exotic birds. So right now I have 5 exotic birds, 2 of which I inherited from the Humane Society to take care of.
Oh, you have them yourself at your
Yes,
home?
yes.
Wow, so they don't have facilities there to...
No, not to take care of exotics. These are your large parrots like macaws or parrots or Amazons and so forth. So after that, I was asked to run the Washington, D.C. office. So I was a lobbyist for 4 years in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
I lobbied the House, the Senate, the FDA, and the USDA for about 4 years.
For?
Egg production. So it was basically agriculture. So I'm very familiar with drug compendiums and management techniques for agriculture. And then my wife and I, I married the girl next door in Hawaii Kai. She's a Kalani grad.
Nice.
So we decided we want to raise our children in Hawaii, and so we came back to Hawaii. And when I came back to Hawaii, I went to work for the Sisters of the Sacred Hearts, and I was their business manager, executive director for a couple years, and then got into hospice work. So I was with Hospice Hawaii for about 12 years.
Oh, wow.
Retired from hospice and went to work for the ARC in Hawaii, in developmentally disabled. And then I went
Is
to...
the ARC Association for Retired Citizens?
That's what everybody thinks, but there is no, it's not an acronym for anything.
Oh, it's not?
It's just the ARC.
Oh, okay, because I
Yes.
worked for it in Chicago and it was called the
That's
ARC,
what
but-
they originally was called, but then here in Hawaii, it's just the ARC.
Nice.
And,
Well, because we don't refer, that name
right.
is not used anymore. so-
Except the Department of
Right,
Health
title.
and the
Oh, really?
CMS still calls it retarded. Yes. They have ICF MRs, which are the ICF, intermediate care facilities for the mentally retarded. So they've never changed that name.
Okay, well, it's 2016. Can we just put a shout out there to take care of
I'm not
that,
going to go down
please?
that track at all.
Yeah.
Then I went to work for AIG, and then I ended up taking a position here with Legacy of Life Hawaii, because I wanted to get back into the nonprofits. I wanted to try corporate business again with AIG, but AIG kind of labeled me as their socialist, and I had to be watched, because if I had freedom, I would give away everything.
Right.
Which didn't bother me, but
No, because
I enjoy-
every organization, even a
Right.
bureaucracy, especially a bureaucracy, needs someone like you know,
Right.
so.
So then I got away from that, went back into nonprofits because once you get the bug about working in nonprofits and working with the community and giving to the community, there's such a feedback to you
I
that
know it.
it's hard to
It's
step
hard to
away
shake,
from.
yeah.
So I will work until I actually am dead.
Yeah.
Or they
Party for
carry me
two.
out, right.
I'll be
Carry me
there
out.
with you.
But I am an organ donor, so they can recover my organs if
Me
they're
too.
if
Yes.
they're viable. But that's kind of what I do, and I love doing it. I love the ability to work with donor families in crisis and be able to help them. And one of the things that I learned right off is when you look at the whole situation, especially from our side, working with the donor families who are in crisis, this is the worst day of their life. But then you see the donor recipients, and this is the best day of their life because it's a new lease on life.
Right.
So you get both of them together at the same time, and it's an amazing interaction with it.
I'm
And it
sure.
makes you think about what you're doing, and that's kind of what hospice was like working with death and dying. Totally different situation because at hospice you're seeing the progression, and it's a slow progression usually. With legacy of life, you're stepping
Usually.
into a tragedy, and then, it's traumatic, but you can help the family. So we concentrate not only on the clinical side of recovering organs, but we also work with the family in our family services department. So we work with the families themselves as they're going through this and help them go
Both
through it.
sides.
Both. Well, we don't really, that's the difference between what Legacy of Life does and what we is what they call an organ procurement organization. And that's the federal designation. So our corporate name is Hawaii Organ Procurement Organization. You'll have California Organ Procurement Organization. So there's 58 of us in the United States.
Oh, okay.
We are the only ones that can recover organs in the state of Hawaii. And it's because of the geographical location and the population. So if our population got bigger, then they may say, well, you have enough for 2 OPOs, but not right now, and I don't think we ever will.
Yeah.
And then geographically, we have one of the largest expanses for what they call a DSA, which is a designated service area. So we cover pretty much all of the islands. We did have included Guam and American Samoa, but the feds realized that that's really too far away for us to control. So they're kind of a separate entity in themselves. But throughout the United States, there are several areas where there are many OPOs. The OPOs then recover the organs, and the organs are not, where they go is not controlled by us at all.
That's where the recovery part comes in. Your
Right, we
specific-
recover only.
Okay.
Okay. And then the transplant centers, there can be as many transplant centers as the population can afford.
Okay.
So we only have one, and that's with Queens. If you
Oh, I
remember,
see.
it used to be with St. Francis, but both of the St. Francis hospitals went bankrupt. The transplant centers are required to be attached to a hospital. They cannot be independent. So the services that are required for a transplant include hospitalization. So the feds say you can't have a transplant center without a hospital.
Well, that does make sense. Well, this is really interesting. We're going to learn more about this after the commercial break. Thank you
okay.
so much.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. That's Ted Ralston. You know, Ted is the host of Where the Road Leads. It shows every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. It's about technology. It's about how people collaborating and solve problems with modern technology. It's where the road leads. We all know that. We should all be listening. Join us there, 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday. Now, what about that do you agree with?
All of it.
I knew he'd say that. Aloha. Say aloha.
Aloha.
Good.
Aloha, my name is Kirsten Baumgart Turner, and I'm the host of Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. We air live on the internet and also on Oceanic Channel 16. I'd invite you to come for a fresh new show every Tuesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. I try to bring on guests that give us a different viewpoint on aspects of sustainability in Hawaii, as well as trying to unpack some of the difficult concepts of measuring and achieving sustainability, particularly with regard to sustainable economic growth and prosperity in Hawaii. Please join us every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Mahalo, aloha.
Thank you so much for joining us again,
Sure.
Steve.
Sure.
We were talking before the break about recovery and what do you call it? Recovery and transplantation.
Plantation? Okay.
Right. And so we were saying that the hospitals that you have to, in order to be a recovery organization, that you have to be attached to a hospital.
No, not a recovery.
Okay.
If you're a transplant, there's actually 3 groups that are involved in transplantation. One is the recovery agency, which we are. The other is the transplant center, which is connected to a hospital, and it must be connected to a hospital. The third is an independent laboratory who does all the testing so that there's no mismatching of and no problems with the blood types and all of the other things that we go through to match up a donor with a recipient, and that they're independent so that there's no way a person can come in and say, well, this is my organ and I can prove it because it's, so there's no connection between the two. There used to be, but the feds have said to us, we are 3 separate organizations and they cannot be connected. They've gone as far as saying certain members of the transplant centers cannot be members of the board of directors of the OPO. So there's control that way too. Now, that's a whole nother story. But we recover the organs. We take all of the demographics and all of the parameters, clinical parameters from that donor. So blood types, and most people think there's only 4 types of blood, but there's actually a lot of different types and subtypes. But we take all of that information and we put it on a centralized computer, which is controlled by the feds. And this is the government agency called UNOS. So they control that computer, and they are part of HRSA. Well, actually, they're a subcontractor of an arm of HRSA, which is called OPTN. So it gets a little,
these acronyms.
yeah, all these acronyms. And then the transplant centers are also members of UNOS. What happens on that side is when a doctor lists their patient on the list to be a recipient, then they list all the parameters for that patient. That goes into the computer at UNOS also. And this is one of the reasons why most people don't realize either, we have HIPAA carve-outs. So we can share this information because we're not part of the HIPAA regulations. So we can share this information and it becomes public information in that sense. So what happens is when we put in the donor information, then we get a list back from UNOS saying, these are the people that you can contact. The parameters for that are controlled by UNOS, and they are not only clinical, but also distance. So a donor here would have, or a recipient here would have priority usually over a donor that's local because they're closer together.
Okay.
But if you have what we call a 0 mismatch, which means the donor is a perfect match to the recipient, maybe in Maryland, then that kidney, will go to Maryland.
Because it has more of a chance to thrive?
Right.
Oh.
And they're the first on the list. We have to, by federal law, follow that list.
So, but it's a kind of an intricate matrix, yeah, that you,
Oh, yes, and it's a
follow,
mean-
like how well, what their condition is, what the type, and there's such a complicated.
If you have a 0 mismatch, say we have like 5 people who perfectly match our donor, then one of the parameters would be distance from the donor.
Okay.
So then if it were a local recipient, they would automatically get it. And then you have regional sharing, and it's different for every organ.
Right, exactly. And
Right, like our transplant center is only certified to transplant livers, kidneys, and pancreases. So no lungs, no hearts. If you need a lung or a heart,
Or skin or eyes or any of the other
well,
things?
that's
I saw
different.
that
That's a
were-
whole nother story.
Oh,
We're
really?
talking only organs right now.
Okay,
Even though
okay.
skin is an organ.
Right, tissue and such
Right,
is
it's all part of
separate.
tissue.
Okay.
And it's separate controls, separate
Oh,
government
wow,
agencies.
second- okay,
Yes.
okay.
So strictly with organs, if we have a lung or a heart, which we are doing, we are recovering lungs and hearts here and shipping them to the mainland. The trouble with Hawaii is that we are 25 or 2,400 miles away from any other transplant center. That organ, kidneys are not too bad because we can put kidneys on a pump, or we can send them on ice all the way back to Maryland or back to the East Coast. And they can transplant them because kidneys can be out of the body and not have to be back into a body 12, 16, 18 hours.
Oh,
And if
wow.
they put them on a pump, even longer. And they will pump them back there. But lungs, hearts, they got to be in and out within probably 8 hours
Oh,
max.
really?
So you're talking a 5-6 hour flight from here to the West Coast. It's going to take them half hour, 45 minutes to pull that organ out of the body. It's going to take them half hour, 45 minutes to put it back into another recipient body. So it's a real critical situation.
So wouldn't they just send the entire donor?
Well, your donor, that would be more expensive.
Oh, yeah, true. And then you have to send the body back
Correct.
probably because.
Most people don't realize if we wanted to ship a body back to the West Coast, it would probably cost around 60 to 80 grand.
What?
It's a special plane, a special flight, because it has to be the person or the donor isn't alive, but the organs are
Have
being
to be-
kept viable through artificial means.
Good point. And
So-
you've got to transport all that stuff too.
Right. But we have transplant centers who fly in, and they charter flights usually because it's quicker. They will charter a flight in to recover a heart or an organ. And we had one of these, especially a pediatric, came in from Arizona. But I believe that was over $100,000 to fly that group in, recover, and fly back.
Who covers that?
Usually it would be private insurance, or if it's a Medicare, Medicaid type of situation. It's
So
a
they
third
would
party.
cover something that
Mhm.
costly?
Yeah. But when looking at the expenses now, this is another side of this which most people don't realize. If you are on dialysis, and I'm taking kidneys only, if you are on dialysis, you're costing CMS probably, and I'm going to use old figures here, it's probably more than that now, but anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 a year for your 3 times a week dialysis.
Right.
We can recover a kidney and transplant it for probably $120,000, $150,000. But from that point on, they're no longer on dialysis. So now you're saving the government $150,000 a year for 15, 20 years, depending on how long that kidney will last.
So is that a viable argument? Like, is this going over? How is this being received?
Very well, as far as the government is concerned, because
Yeah?
we're saving them,
So, and
$1
they're
trillion
saying,
a
okay,
year.
fine, let's
Oh,
do
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Nice, great job.
Well, yeah, it's a whole nother story with non-renal
Other,
stuff,
right.
with the
other
hearts or
organs,
lungs or whatever.
yeah.
The third part of this is the labs. So all 3 of us, these groups are controlled by UNOS, which is part, like I said, part of HRSA. The other side of this is CMS, who is also part of HRSA.
Okay,
which
what's HRSA?
also-
I'm sorry.
HRSA is the Human Resources Administration,
Okay.
federal government, and they have many arms. One of them is CMS, which is the Combined Services Medicare, Medicaid.
Oh, okay, okay.
Excuse me. They're the ones who pay for everything. So they also control us and the transplant centers and the labs. So we get it from both ends.
Wow.
And typical government, and I hope there's no government people listening, they kind of don't talk to one another. So as an industry, though, we've been trying to push them together so that they can be uniform as far as what controls they have over us and how they control us.
Right.
Because at this point, it's a push and a pull. The transplant centers are required to only transplant viable organs. And if they lose a patient or an organ, they're dinged. We have to recover every possible organ we can recover. They're pushing us away.
Right. Yeah.
But they don't transplant them because they're not of good quality or whatever, and we should probably not have recovered those organs. But we get dinged if we don't recover them. They get dinged if they transplant them. So it's kind of a push-pull. So
Right.
we're moving towards, and you got to remember, transplant has only been around since the 60s. So it's a new type of service to the community. But the rewards are unbelievable. And
Yes.
where we're going, and I'm really happy with Hawaii right now because we started our registry, which means the one on your license.
Yeah, I was going
Okay.
to ask you about that next.
That's been around for quite a long time, but it's only been digital and on the internet for about 8 years. When we first started the registry, before it became digital, we were only in the 30, maybe 40% of the population over the age of 18 were registered. We are currently at about 56 or 58% of the population. The national average has just reached 50, so we're above the national average for registered donors. And that really helps because
Wow.
you're taking that burden away from your family members. If you are in an accident and you are eligible to be a donor, and there's a whole nother story on this one, then that takes the pressure off of your family of making the decision.
Yeah, exactly. They've
because-
got enough to deal with.
Right.
This
So we
person
can just
already
say-
said they want this.
Right, and we just come in and help them facilitate
Right.
the donation.
And as far as
then-
I'm concerned, isn't it a kind of an easier sell? I know that's a bad term, but for them to know, hey, listen, I know that your dad is gone, but now, there are other people
Right.
who are going to live because of him and who are going
Right.
to have, that to me softens the blow a little
It does,
bit.
and it really helps. We have found that it really helps in the long term as well, knowing that they're a family member, no matter what he was or she was
Right.
before, they've now helped somebody else,
Yeah.
which really makes a difference.
Yeah,
So
that's
that-
beautiful.
In that sense, it's really helpful.
So let me just ask you, so let's say people register when they go to fill out their application. It says, for driver's license, do you want to be an organ donor, yes or no? And so, but other than that, how do people donate? And then how do you compile your list and then you give it to UNOS, which I wanted to clear up for our viewers. UNOS is, I know it's the National Database of Organ Donations. I forget what
Right.
it stands for, but
Um,
quick
Now
test.
you got
Come
me,
on,
yeah.
all those degrees out of
Yeah, but acronyms have never
It's
been
a
my
good point. Well,
my
honestly,
point.
it's so tricky. There's
It's
so many.
United
You're
Network
listening.
of Organ Sharing,
Ah,
I believe.
well done. Okay, so how do people?
Once you're
donate.
on the list, that's kind of it, okay? Excuse me. If you get in, this is one of the things that really is one of the myths that we come across. A lot of people think if they have that on their license, that if they get into an accident and they're marginal, that the EMTs won't do anything for them.
Right.
It's just the opposite. They're going to do everything and go beyond to keep you viable so that you could be, if possible, a donor. So it's just the opposite of what they're thinking.
That's funny.
But-
I've never thought of that. All right. Well, listen. Hold on. Hold that thought because
Okay.
we're about to go to commercial, and I want to hear more about what you're saying.
Sure.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I host a show called Healthcare in Hawaii here on Think Tech. We get together once a week or sometimes twice a month. Depends when we're busy. We get together less often, but we love to see you here to talk about the preeminent healthcare issues in our state. Our programs vary very widely. We talk about economics, we talk about healthcare, we talk about social issues on this program. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on Think Tech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness. I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Hi, thank you for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we now are going to finish where we left off, which is a common misconception of
Right.
people who donate their organs. They think, well, I don't, or think people who are contemplating it, thinking maybe they won't because if they're in an accident, something might happen, and to push them closer to that
Right.
donation side. So.
And so there's the opposite side to that. We get sometimes family members calling us and saying, my loved one wanted to be a donor and it was on his license, but you never even talked to us. That's the other side of the story.
Oh.
Most people don't realize that to be an organ donor, okay, they have to be viable and on a ventilator so that the organs are kept viable for transplantation. Once your heart stops and the circulation stops, the degradation or degradation of the organs happens almost immediately. So within 5 to 10 minutes, the organs are no longer viable
Wow.
for transplant. So a
So
lot
a
of times,
DNR, if they have a
if they,
DNR,
well,
it
if they have a
conflicts with-
DNR and they have a registry, they'll bypass the DNR.
Oh, good.
Okay, because they're a registered donor. But if they're DOA and they've passed away there at the accident site, rather than going to the family and saying, do you want to, we already know they can't be. So we won't even bother them with the idea that we're going to recover organs, okay? What we will do though, because on the website, if you register, and there's several ways you can register. You can register going to a health fair. Usually we have tables there where people can go in and sign up. They can do a manual one and send it to us and we can put it onto the computer for them. They can do it at the DMV, or they can go online to legacyoflifehawaii.org and sign up to be a donor. And they can actually pick what they want. I don't want my heart. I don't want my, lungs to go anywhere.
Nice.
So we can.
And it can still be open casket. It
Right.
can still,
It can always be open casket. And the invasive part of it is no more than, in fact, I think an autopsy is more invasive than the recovery systems that we do. On most, technically most autopsies, they go in with a fee. We go in through the sternum, so it looks like you had a heart transplant or heart valve removal or something like that.
Okay.
A lot less. But what we can do, if they've gone online, we can go in and approach the family for tissue or for eyes.
Right.
So they can still
okay.
be a donor as we classify them, but not an organ donor.
Okay.
Okay, that's a whole nother aspect of what business we do. Comes under different government controls. Now we're talking about the FDA, which is tissues and eyes are FDA, not
Oh,
US,
I didn't
not
know that.
not CMS.
Okay.
They don't do anything with tissues. So we can recover skin, bones, tendons, and so forth, which are not usually life-saving, but they're life-enhancing, because nowadays a lot of your athletes who get an injury like an ACL or something that eliminates them from doing what they really want to do, which is to play sports. They can now get a transplant of an ACL and go back to playing sports.
Right.
And there are several professional athletes that have had this done. Okay.
Right,
so
or
it's-
even people in their later years of life, and they've got a good 20, 30 years left to live, but they don't want to live it in
Right.
pain or less abled. So
Right.
you provide.
Right. And now they're actually doing what we call ACL, now an acronym that now I'm forgetting, but it's the arm, hand transplants, face transplants. So in the United States, we've done, I think, 5 or 6 face transplants already.
Wow.
One of the stories that I love, I was at a convention and saw a gentleman who had lost both of his arms in an accident and had both of them transplanted. So he had new arms. And he was a stand-up comedian. And you could probably Google
Nice.
him. But
What was
he
his
said,
name?
I can't remember what his
Okay.
name was. But one of the comments he made was, I lost half of my comical material when they transplanted my arms, because now he had arms. Whereas
Oh,
his
right.
humor was before, it's hard to scratch your nose without them,
Right.
type of thing. But he said one of the best things that he had, which really moved him, was that a week before he was presenting, he was outside and it started raining. And it's the first time in many, many years that he felt a raindrop on his arm.
Oh.
And that just blew me away. I'm thinking, God, really? We take that for granted.
Yes.
And he did too until he lost his arms. And then to feel a raindrop on his arms was fantastic. And that's the kind of thing that makes us do what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
And why we do it is because we get a lot more out of knowing that we can help these people. And that's the skin, the tendons, the bones, and so forth. And
Okay.
then eyes. There are a lot of people who need cornea transplants and can't see, the leaves on a tree. And then all of a sudden, gee, I didn't know there were houses up on that ridge.
Right.
Because now they can see with the new corneas. So
That's incredible.
but it's a totally different type of conditions for us. It's like a separate business. It's not the organ transplants that we do, but it's the skin and tissue and eyes. So.
Okay. So can I ask you how many donors we have here on island and how it compares per capita to
We
other
average
places?
about 4 donors a month, we really have no control over it. That's
But you do incentives like giving people a discount on getting their license. I don't know. You guys can lobby
But
maybe
that
for
doesn't-
more things like that.
that's true, but that doesn't increase the donors.
No? Hey,
No.
I know I've convinced me. You get
Yeah, but you
$5
only have
off of your license if
yeah.
you. If
But
you,
so are you going to go out and get an accident?
Well, no, but I'm
So
saying people
we don't
who are
have
newly
control
getting,
over the number of donors.
Right.
That is truly up to God and how you live your life.
But I'm saying
But-
getting new donors. Is there any, like I heard maybe there's some incentive at Planned Parenthood, or do you know of anything related to that, or doctors or something like that? where-
Not really.
Okay.
And we, like I said, we're getting, we have a conversion rate of about 85%. So not 85, 75. So 75% of the deaths or the viable donors that we get are donors.
Okay.
So that's pretty high.
How do we compare in Hawaii?
The national average is about right there, 75, 76. So we're right. We used to be, when I first started with Legacy of Life, we were way below the national average. But since I came on board and since we do a lot of the different things, especially enhancing our aftercare, we do a donor recognition ceremony every year out at, when I first started, we do it out at, in Kaneohe. Now I'm drawing a blank on the golf course out there.
Oh, Kula.
Kula. And we half filled the main ballroom.
Oh, that's huge too.
Well, last year we ran over. We were actually had people out
Wow.
onto the lanai and so forth. So, and we actually pay for our donors to come in from the neighbor islands. We pay them.
So any person who's
The donor.
donated,
Is invited to the donor recognition ceremony. And we honor them. It's for them. It's not for recipients or anybody else. It's for
just people
them.
who made the commitment that they will donate their organs
Well,
and tissue.
Families
Right.
that are donors.
Oh, I see,
So
I
it's
see.
for donors only.
The
so-
family of the donors.
Correct.
Okay. Wow, what a wonderful way to
And-
honor them. That's
Yeah, but it also
beautiful.
is therapeutic for them.
Right,
because they're-
exactly, and they can all be together. That is a great initiative. I'm
Right.
sure.
And our board of directors has
Oh, that's
said,
great.
because it's gotten so big, they're saying, well, everybody is saying, and a lot of the other OPOs on the mainland cut it down, and they say, no, you can only if you were a donor in the last year or last 2 years, can you come to this? We still invite our donors from the beginning. And our board of directors said, no, we're not going to limit it. We'll do 2 donor recognitions this year.
Great.
So
Great.
that's the way, and the board of directors, I have to give them credit. They're all volunteers, but they are the best people.
Obviously,
And
I mean, and
they-
this is what gives Hawaii our good name.
That's right.
These beautiful souls that
Right,
do these
that
kinds
do
of
these
things. Yeah.
In fact, we have several board members who have gone off the board but stayed on our committees because they like doing what they're doing to help the community as far as donors are concerned, recognizing the donors and transplants.
That's
And we work
great.
really close with transplant centers. It's difficult for them because of our population and the fact that we're so far away from any other, not are we so far away from every other transplant center, our transplant center is far away from any other OPO.
Right.
So getting organs in is also a problem for them. But the transplant center does a very, very good job of taking care of their transplant recipients, and
That's great.
yeah, so
Keep
they're
it
doing
going.
they're doing a great job. Queens is doing a really great job with it.
That's
I've
good
seen
to
that
know, too.
change since it moved to Queens from San Francisco.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Great.
it's dramatic.
So that was it's interesting segue that you've brought us to, because we've got the past. That is what happened. Now, where do you see the future going? What do you see?
There's a lot of things. Like I said, we're a young. I don't want to call us an industry. We are a young healthcare service. We save the government a lot of money. We save healthcare insurance a lot of money. But what we're seeing is more research being done. So a couple of things that are coming out is we now have in research, we have what they call a heart in a box, which is a pump so that the hearts can be recovered and kept viable for a longer period of time.
Wonderful. Oh, so technology that helps keep these
Correct.
things viable. Okay.
And a lung in a box, and what they call an ex vivo machine. And it's being used widely outside of the United States. For example, Toronto is one of the centers for the ex vivo machine, and they actually have recovered or taken lungs that have been out of the body for 12 hours, put them on the machine, and transplanted them 12 hours later, and they're just as good as fresh lungs.
That's incredible.
You're seeing a lot, and they're taking that information and saying, what is it actually doing to these lungs that make them better? And they're finding out that they actually are like reconditioning the lungs.
Wow.
So, somebody said to me, well, so if I have a lung problem, I can go in and have my lungs removed, put them on the machine, and have them put them back in. So refurbish your own
Right.
lungs. I said, I don't think it works that way.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd like a tune-up here. I
Right.
could freshen
But
up those lungs.
That's kind of what we're seeing. And on the tissue side, like I said, we're seeing more face transplants. When you think about prosthetics, everybody says, well, a prosthetic is fine, and it looks fine, but there's no feeling. And there's no reaction, like a smile, or blink your eyes, or wink.
Right.
You can't do that with a prosthetic.
That's a good point.
But with a face transplant, you now have feeling. You can smile, you can blink your eyes, and you can move your lips and cheeks and so forth. But you can't do that with prosthetics.
This is so exciting.
So
to people who want to learn more, can you send them to your site?
sure.
What is it?
Come the legacyoflifehawaii.org.
All right. Well,
and-
Stephen Kula, what
Oh, is
were
it
you going to
time
say?
up
I'm
already?
sorry?
Oh, no.
It is, I know. It's gone so fast. This was so interesting. We learned so much. So thank you so much for your
Sure.
time,
My
Stephen.
pleasure. I love doing it.
Great.
Okay.
Take